Welcome back, guys. I'm glad you're here. Get excited. AA is going to change your fucking life. Did mine. Okay, so I think the easiest way of doing this is just reading through. I'm just pretend like I am. I'm just going to pretend like I'm working with a newcomer, really. And I'm going to showcase things that I think are really important. And I know the attention span of a newcomer is very, very short. Well, mine's quite short, regardless, anyways, right now. So let's do chapter by chapter, but we'll split the chapters into two parts, just so you don't have to be at a place of soaking in too much information. I know sometimes it can feel like you're being blasted with a fire hose, right? You want to have some time to ruminate and chew on some of these ideas. Initially, they can be really, really overwhelming. And, you pair that with a bunch of doubt that you're focusing on, judgment while you're sitting in the rooms, intolerance. I mean, you're probably frustrated that you're actually even having to do any of this bullshit in AA anyways, right? So let's just try and lay aside any sort of prejudice or prejudgment, as I'm often told, and let's just jump in. Chapter 1. I'm also going to say that at the bottom in the comment section, please don't hesitate to address any questions you guys might have. And you're probably going to have a lot. And you can use this basically anywhere. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps me too, right? I pass on something that's so freely given to me to you guys in hopes that you can live with more freedom and more joy in life without the use of cocaine and whiskey. All right, Bill's story. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Oh, by the way, I should let you know if I make any mistakes or mumble jumble, please forgive me. Here was love, applause, war, moments by sublime, with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. And in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudice of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel of an old tombstone. Here lies Hampshire Grenadier, who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is near, forget, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22, and a veteran of foreign wars. I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation? My talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of vast enterprises which I would manage with the utmost assurance. Also, keep in mind the language is, kind of hard to digest. It's not the easiest stuff to read. So go over it slowly. This is not a race. This is something that I've done countless amount of times with newcomers, countless amount of times sponsors has, pointed things out for me too, right? The idea is just for you to sit here and digest some of this 164 pages the first time and see if there's anything that really relates to your struggle and your experience with alcohol or drugs, right? Next page. I took a night course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long walks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceived their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived. That totally touched me. That was exactly how I thought before I came to the program. By the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grips. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to the ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. I went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and management, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of a financial reference service. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculation, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. I should probably let you know that Bill W. and Bill's story, this is just sort of going through one of the founders of AA, his sort of battle with alcohol and how he came to finding the solution and essentially turning his solution into the 12 steps. Anyways, back to the reading. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. And at the end of it, reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several thousands of dollars for that year. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. There was loud talk in Jad's places uptown. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. How many people can relate to that? Fair weather friends, whether out at the bar, at the club, throwing big bucks around. How many people want to be your friend then? My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrance of my friends terminated in a row. I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. In 1929, I contracted gall fever. We went at once to the country. My wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking. Every day and every night. It was fun to come around the exclusive course, which had inspired such an awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirling fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock. 5 hours after the market closed, the ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ minus 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported of men jumping to their death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. The next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our custom style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me, but drinking cut off me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokers' places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. At what point in your life did liquor become a necessity? Right? At what point in time were you at a place where you're like, oh, this isn't just for shits and giggles anymore, and this is at a place where I fucking need to drink because I am shaking, I'm anxious, I don't feel right, and the only way I do is if I shoot back a couple beers or have some vodka or whatever is your choice of drink. Think about that. Bathtub of gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. How often did you get to a place in your own life where you were at a place where you thought you still had it under control? How many times were you just absolutely broken and the next day waking up thinking, you know what, I'm not that bad? This idea of control is one more of illusion than anything. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by a mortgage holder. Mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point in 1932, and I somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and the chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. How many times have you done this? Swearing off alcohol or drugs forever. Before then, I'd written lots of sweet promises, but my wife had happily observed that this time I meant business. And so did I, or so I did. Shortly after I came home drunk, there had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksuredness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. Never been there before? I know for sure I had been. But I might as well get good and drunk then, right? It's that whole idea of like, fuck, well, I've already had a couple. I've already fucking thrown away my sobriety. I may as well get absolutely loaded. I mean, that's how I like to feel anyways, right? Never wanted to have a couple drinks. I wanted to feel fucking pissed. The remorse and horror and hopelessness of the next morning were unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. There was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My withering nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. How many times did I wake up in the morning dealing with this? All the bullshit that I did the night before, the fact that I drank again. I didn't want to live. I felt terrible. Can you relate? The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms. The mind had endured this agony 2 more years. Can you fucking believe that? Like, this is what the insanity of alcohol does. You are destroyed for years. You've got years track record of fucking up. And people wanting to give up on you and leaving you around. Somehow, he managed to go on for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window, or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back, as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when physical and mental torture was so hellish I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. I hate to say it, but I can totally relate to that. The insanity of what drugs and alcohol do to your mind is overwhelming sometimes. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been ill, seriously ill, bodily and mentally. Let's underline that, because that's what alcoholism is. It's a dis-ease, right? A mental and spiritual, physical illness, really. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in the alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to battling liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. How true is that? How true is it that you can be so weak when it comes to drugs and alcohol, but when it comes to other parts of your life, you seem to just be totally with it? It's baffling. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regular and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Wrong. It's not. It's not the answer. It's got nothing to do with intelligence. But it was not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The cure of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremors, or develop wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, and of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining the endless procession of Soths who had gone before me. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched all around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol or drugs was my master. And I think we're going to put that on pause and call that the first part of chapter 1. And I will continue the rest of it. You guys can go take a break or get some food, whatever you like. And we'll be back with part 2. See you on the next video. Bye.